Hi, I'm John Calvin.
I'm Martin Luther.
I'm King Henry VIII.
This is John Calvin, a French reformer who created his own idea of Protestantism, which became known as Calvinism. His pastimes include playing with his dog Fifi and persecuting others. This is King Henry VIII. The Pope declared him defender of the faith, and he began the Reformation in England to divorce his wife. He enjoys beheading his wives and not listening to the Pope. And finally, this is Martin Luther. He began the Protestant Reformation and was the founder of Lutheranism. His hobbies include nailing strange papers to doors and starting revolutions.
An indulgence is the means by which the Church takes away punishment that a person would receive in purgatory. Indulgences became popular by the start of the 1500s and originally were to offer Christians a way of doing good as a penance for their sins. However, people started selling indulgences and made profits off of it. Here, we have a picture of Johann Tetzel selling an indulgence to somebody. Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk and university lecturer who wrote the 95 Theses that started the Protestant Reformation. The 95 Theses denounced the sales of indulgences. He protested against indulgences and thought they were corrupt. The church tried to ignore Luther, but they just couldn't anymore. Luther was incited to Rome, and he refused to go. Instead, he elaborated his teachings even further. Sola Scriptura, Sola Fide, and Sola Gratia were all things he elaborated on. The church gave Luther the option to either denounce these ideas or he would be excommunicated. Martin Luther was excommunicated in 1521. Luther didn't intend to start a total reformation, he just wanted to share his ideas.
John Calvin took Martin Luther's ideas even further. He believed in the supreme authority of the Scripture. He was under extreme threats in France and fled to Switzerland in 1536. Calvin established a theocracy in Geneva. A theocracy is a form of government in which God is understood to be the head of state. Like Luther, Calvin believed in the supreme authority of Scripture and Scripture alone. Unlike Luther, however, he denied Christ's presence in the Eucharistic elements. Calvin advocated for very simple church worship, with none of the elaborate rituals, ornamentations, or statues. When Calvin arrived in Switzerland, he wrote the Institutes of Christian Religion, which clearly outlined his understanding of the Christian faith and practices. Protestants in Geneva asked Calvin to help implement reforms, and he proved to be a great administrator. He founded a university at Geneva to train ministers. He preached almost daily and wrote extensively. Calvin established a theocracy in Geneva with the church dominating state affairs. He enforced strict moral laws and established a system of complete intolerance of any religion other than his brand of Protestantism. Practicing beliefs opposed to Calvin's was punishable by death, often by public burning.
Unlike Calvin, King Henry VIII defended the faith against Luther's claims. For this, Pope Leo XI gave him the title Defender of the Faith. King Henry was a prominent figure in England throughout the early 1500s, serving as king from 1509 to 1547. He is most commonly known for starting the Protestant Reformation in England after Pope Clement VII refused to annul his marriage. His wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon, failed to produce a male child, sending King Henry into a frenzy in his attempt to carry on his legacy through a son. When one of Henry's mistresses, Anne Boleyn, became pregnant, he decided that he did not need permission from the Pope or anyone else for that matter. In 1534, King Henry VIII declared himself head of the Church of England, also known as the Anglican Church. He implemented several new institutions, all of which focused on stressing the king's authority over the Pope. For example, Parliament issued the Act of Supremacy, which declared the English monarch the head of the Anglican Church. He then ordered the clergy to abandon their old ways and follow him, and he eliminated all monasteries. Anyone who refused to bow to his rule was executed. Under the rule of King Henry VIII, the Church was completely separate from the Pope and from Rome. Throughout his reign, there was only once when the people challenged his rule. This was known as the Pilgrimage of Grace. In the end, all who rebelled were executed. Henry also executed 2 of his 6 wives for failing to produce a son. By the time of his death, he had only one child to carry on his legacy, Edward VI. His obsession with that legacy brought on the Protestant Reformation in England, and ultimately led to the death of thousands of people. Despite all of his many faults, King Henry VIII always rejected Lutheran teachings and never considered himself to be a Protestant.
In summary, the Protestant Reformation was the 16th century religious, political, intellectual, and cultural upheaval that splintered Catholic Europe.
setting in place the structures and beliefs that would define the continent in the modern era. In Northern and Central Europe, reformers like Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Henry VIII challenged papal authority and questioned the Catholic Church's ability to define Christian practice. They argued for a religious and political redistribution of power into the hands of the Bible and pamphlet-reading pastors and princes. The disruption triggered wars, persecution, the so-called Counter-Reformation, and the Catholic Church's delayed but forceful response to the Protestants.